Hello and welcome to Let's Argue with Jay Playhard. I am your host, Jay, and this is a special 40th birthday edition for your boy. Yes, that's right, April 9th, 2024. I turned 40 years old. So I apologize for the late drop, but I've been kind of living it up the last few days, to be quite honest. So, with that being said, we're going to move on to the first topic of the show, and that is the Women's College Basketball National Championship between Iowa and South Carolina. That game being taken by the Lady Gamecocks 87-75 to cap an 38-0 season. And that's particularly impressive when you think about they lost all five starters to the WNBA last year. This was a totally new team, a very young team, and they never lost a game. On the other end of this was a superstar guard, Caitlin Clark. She had 30 points on 10 of 28 shooting. She was 5 of 6 from free throw, but you could tell that, yes, she was the best player on the court, but I think she and her teammates fell to the better team. South Carolina, I've been saying, the Monstars. They're good everywhere. They literally do not have a glaring weakness as a team. When you combine that with the revenge factor, because Iowa did knock those same Gamecocks out of the tournament last year in the Final Four, it was a perfect mix of motivation for South Carolina. Raven Johnson, let's give her some credit for taking that performance in the prior year in the loss personally and taking it upon herself to guard Caitlin, and you could tell she was making a difference on the defensive end for her team. One big stat to me that stood out in this game was the lack of rebounding for Iowa. I understand that South Carolina, they have the taller players. If we're just being totally honest about it, they've got Cardosa down there. She's a beast. We're going to talk about her in a second. But 18-7. That was the discrepancy for offensive rebounds in this game. So when you look at a team that rebounds as well as South Carolina does, you're not going to get a lot of second chances at the basket. So if South Carolina is defending you on the wing that night and they're forcing you into a lot of jump shots, you got to hit them. And I would, to their credit, in the first quarter, they were able to do that. Caitlin scored 18 of her 30 in the first 10 minutes, and Kate Martin hit some threes and things like that. But you could tell as the game wore on, the depth, it was just different. When South Carolina's second unit came in there was literally no drop-off. Some of these ladies, I'm going to go through a few names for you here. Tessa Johnson, she really carried the offensive load at the other end for the Lady Gamecocks, scoring 19 points. Pow Pow. Oh, and she's a freshman. She gave him 22 minutes. She was 3 or 4 from 3, and she's coming back next year. So a lot of these young ladies, they really chipped in, and it was a team effort. And there was no one player that Iowa could focus on to shut them down offensively. Camila Cardosa, 50% from the field, 17 rebounds. She also had 15 points in this game. She was a force. She was as good as advertised, and she's headed to the WNBA, where I think she's going to be a solid get for whoever drafts her. But side of this, we have Iowa. The lack of shooting from the supporting cast really hurt Iowa down the stretch. What I mean by that is you could tell that Caitlin was the only one kind of creating her own shot, creating her own space. The rest of the team was kind of being schemed open a little bit. Kate Martin, she got open a few times, got loose, hit some threes early on there, but they just didn't have that extra gear, if you know what I mean. The second unit for Iowa was outscored by one player on South Carolina's second unit. Iowa's bench scored no points in this game. And that is the biggest reason why the margin is so lopsided, 12 points. Tessa Johnson outscored their entire bench. And when I don't care how great you are, excuse me, I don't care how great you are. If you don't have one or two of your players on against a team like this, no one player is going to beat them. Caitlin would have literally had to drop 50 points, 10 assists, 5 rebounds for them to win this game if the bench was going to play like that. And that's no shade to Iowa, but that is the truth. Moving on to the men's side of things, Purdue versus UConn. UConn did prevail in this game in pretty dominating fashion. They won this 75-60. Collegiate Player of the Year, Zach Edey for Purdue, did have 37 and 10, but just like the Iowa Hawkeyes, really didn't have the help around him really to put up the fight needed to be a threat in this game. As far as Edey goes, experts believe that he is a player from a older age, meaning from, if this was the 90s, if this was the 80s, Zach Edey would probably be a first-round pick in the NBA. But they're saying that the game has evolved so much, and you've got to do more as a big man. Maybe he can learn how to shoot the three. I don't know. I didn't see him do that a lot at Purdue this year. But Zach Edey's going to be interesting. He's 7'5", so is Victor Wembanyama. But when I look at Zach Edey and I look at Wembanyama, I look at two very, very different players. And for Edey, it's going to be hard for a guy like Edey to stay in front of Wemby. I'm going to tell you that right now. Not much to say about this game. The big news coming out of it is UConn coach Dan Hurley going to stay at UConn and build a dynasty after back-to-back titles, or was he going to look at one point in time, the most coveted position in college coaching, and that is Kentucky men's basketball? John Calipari leaving to go to Arkansas, but I think it was said today that Dan Hurley is expected to stay with the Huskies. And as a guy who saw the rise of the men and women's programs in the 90s and where they are today, because the women did make the Final Four as well with Paige Buckers, it's just good to see UConn back and dominating. It takes me back to my childhood. Now, if you're Kentucky, if you're the Wildcats, who do you go after? I understand the frustration with Coach Calipari and the early route exits the last few years, but who's out there? Is it Penny Hardaway from Memphis? Dan Hurley's already said he's staying put. Who is it for Kentucky? Is it Bill Self? I'm pretty sure he's pretty happy over there at Kansas because, those Jayhawks, they are loyal. But I think Kentucky's in a weird position here. I don't think in my lifetime I've ever seen Kentucky not know who they're going to go after or there be an obvious choice. I grew up on Rick Pitino, Tubby Smith, to John Calipari. Those coaches are tenured. They all win national championships at Kentucky. But if we're being honest about it, Kentucky hasn't been Kentucky for a very long time. When you depend on talented freshmen, now granted, these freshmen are, NBA destined, and a lot of them do achieve greatness in the NBA. But it is very hard to, especially in this era, the NIL era, where players are getting paid and they're more individualized than ever before. It's going to be very hard for Kentucky to go into these tournaments and continue to depend on one-year wonders. Every now and again, you get an Anthony Davis, you get a John Wall, but every five-star hyped player may not pan out. Just because you got 5 stars, you still got to go out there and compete. And year over year, we are seeing these smaller schools go further and further in the tournament because those teams have played together for 2, 3, sometimes 4 years. You look at that Oakland team A lot of those guys were upperclassmen. So you're asking an 18-year-old with minimal experience at the college level, probably his first experience on a stage like this, to carry you to a national championship. I guarantee you the odds are going to be not in your favor doing that every year. And I think that's where the Kentucky faithful and Coach Calipari were kind of disagreeing. To me, on the outside looking in, John Calipari has always been a coach that gets you ready for the next level. He's kind of a Deion Sanders in football, if you will. You know, he can get you to that next level because he's coached at that next level. He's done a lot. But when it comes to experience, the players have to make the plays. And that's where you're seeing the reps come in at. That's where you're seeing it in the tournament. These smaller schools beating your traditional powers, because Kentucky, Duke, Carolina, Kansas, back in the day, their stars stayed 3 years. That's why the women were the most viewed stars this year. Zach Edey played amazing ball in this tournament, and nobody really talked about him. The talk was about Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Camila Cardosa, Paige Buckers, Juju Watkins. Do you see the list of names I'm rattling off here? The men's game is changing. The women's game is changing as well, for the better. And I think Calipari was very good at playing that game. But there's also a team-building aspect to it. And I think that's what was lacking, just in my humble opinion. I'm not an expert. I'm just a fan who watches a lot of basketball. But it's going to be interesting to see Calipari at Arkansas, because they're talented too. And they got an NIL budget. Jerry Jones is an alumnus of Arkansas, just to kind of give you some names there. There's quite a few. You know, the Clintons, you know. Lots of powerful alumni with deep pockets. So it's going to be interesting to see Calipari at a place like this. In other news, you know, we don't cover this often, but I'll cover it today. It's my birthday. I'm going to do what I want. J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar. I mean, you know, I'm a big music fan. You know, I know this is a sports show, but I'm going to spend a little time on this, man. Indulge me for my birthday. As a rap fan, as a fan of competition, I'm ready to see it. I want to see Drake jump in with the elbow drop. I want to see more Future. I want to see what Rick Ross got to say. Who is the greatest rapper in the game? Now, I did hear Cole apologized and all of that, and I listened to the 7-minute drill, his response to Kendrick's verse on the Like That Metro Boomin and Future collaboration. And I got to say, round one goes to Kendrick. Flow, beat, bars, punchlines, all Kendrick. I dare to say he knocked J. Cole down. Some people are saying it's a first-round knockout. But I want to hear where's Drake in all of this? I want to hear some Drake bars now. I'm not Joe Budden. I'm not trying to drive into the music lane, but yeah, man, you know, I'm just having fun. It is the birthday today. So, you know, yeah, we're going to make this one short and sweet. And I'm Jay Playhard, signing off.